Good afternoon, everybody. That's actually a little better than my high school class, but let's try it one more time. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. That's proper. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge that you all taught today. And so I'm a 25-year vet of the classroom in my community in East Oakland, and so I know what it's like to teach all day and then come sit in ridiculously old and hard wood seats with metal backs and listen to some clown that's not even from your community. So I acknowledge that fact and appreciate your presence here today and the service that you did today in service of our children. I know I'm sort of in Southern California right now, and so we didn't bring the sun because y'all already have that, but apparently we brought you an earthquake. And we're going to leave it here. I'm not taking that back. First of all, I want to apologize for any way in which your early relationship with our community was not supportive of your work with children. Because first and foremost, when we started designing this project about 8 years ago, our primary goal was to create the conditions that ended the isolation of the teaching profession. And so much of my experience in my 25 years was an experience of isolation. And I primarily have been a secondary teacher, and there was never enough collaboration time in my time as a teacher. And what I found was that was actually the most productive PD that I got, was when I was sitting down with other people that are banging it out every day in the classrooms and could really get down on the ground and talk about real children, real challenges, and real successes. And so one of the reasons why we called our project a network is because part of what we're trying to do is to connect teachers in a more meaningful experience that actually feels like development and feels like support in their buildings, but then to also start connecting people across districts and then across states. So 10 is currently working with schools and districts in 12 different states and internationally in New Zealand. And so as a part of being in this network, you then gain access to all of that teaching experience, all of those teaching skills, and all of those teaching struggles. And my experience both as a teacher and as a teacher of teachers is that every single problem that I struggle with as a teacher, and every single problem that I hear other teachers struggling with, I also know another teacher somewhere in this country that has struggled with that same issue and unlocked it. And the problem is that it is straight up happenstance, straight luck, that you would cross paths with that teacher. And that's absurd. It doesn't make any sense both for us as a profession, and it doesn't make any sense for the youth and the families that we serve. And so the idea of this network is to create the conditions where teachers start teaching teachers, and that teachers have more access to more teachers. And so everybody in this room has a problem of practice that you're wrestling with in your mind right now. It could be a particular kid, it could be some whack literacy program that they're now making you implement, it might be some dumb shit from Pearson that's being shoved down your throat, I don't know. But it's, right, there's something in here, right, that you're probably struggling with a little bit right now. And then there's something in your practice that you're really damn good at. And so one of the expectations that we have of people that participate in our network is that you're willing to go to both places. That you're willing to be honest about your problems of practice with the promise that you'll get support to work on that problem of practice. But we also ask that in honoring this time-honored profession, that you also commit to... I guess that brings static with me too. We good? Oh yeah, we're good. Yeah, right there. I can use my teacher voice, bro. So the other thing we ask, though, is that you not only present your problems of practice, but that you also present the keys to the problems of practice that you've unlocked, and that you make a commitment to supporting your colleagues. And when I say your colleagues, I don't just mean in your building or in your grade level or in this district, right? I mean in this profession. And through your work with us, and this really depends on the amount of engagement that you choose to put with us, but if you engage with us, inevitably you're going to cross paths with teachers from New York, and from Baltimore, and from LA, and from Oakland, and from Minnesota, and from Pennsylvania, and from New Zealand. Right? And inevitably, when you cross all those paths, you're going to cross paths with a teacher that you got a key that they could use. Right? And so we ask you, as a part of being in this network, to be willing to share your keys, because teachers love to teach. And we don't just love to teach kids, right? We just love to teach. And so we ask that you teach in this network as well. So that's some of the kind of philosophical, high-minded underpinnings of 10. But what I want to do is take you down in the weeds a bit, so you have a sense about like how this is actually structured, that to create these opportunities for teachers to be teaching teachers. So the goal today is to really expose you to how 10 evolves. Okay, I gave you some of the kind of larger principles and goals and vision that we have for this work that we're doing with teachers. And then the second piece is to actually take you down in the weeds a little bit and let you get a sense about how we actually do this. What are you going to actually be experiencing over the course of the school year? So our guiding pivot, where we're pushing a lot of schools and a lot of practitioners and a lot of policymakers, is the pivot from the conversation that we've frankly been having since 1954, which is the commitment to an equal education system, and the growing trend around the country to start talking about an equitable education system. Okay, and equality and equity are oftentimes, in my experience, so I'm asked to work with a lot of districts around the country as a thought partner as they start making this move, right? So I'm just going to take a wild guess and assume that equity is a conversation y'all are having here as well. Yes? No? Kind of? Sort of? Yeah? Okay. So what I find is that in a lot of the conversations, a lot of the strategic plans that districts are drawn up to do to start achieving equity, I literally have seen dozens of district level and school level documents that use the words equity and equality interchangeably. Okay? And equity is not the same as equality. Okay? In fact, it's fundamentally different. So I'll exemplify this for you with a little example. So, what's your name?
Pat.
Pat? Okay. What do you teach, Pat?
Research.
Okay. You teach children, Pat. Tell us your name.
Summer.
Summer and Pat, okay? So, Pat, can you hold up what I gave you? Okay, so I gave Pat that water bottle, okay? Pat, can you verify that these are identical?
Yes, they are.
Okay. All right. Is that equal?
Yes.
And what if I told you that Pat is hungry and Summer is thirsty? Now is it equal?
Yes, it's still equal.
Ah, classic teacher move. Change your answer. Who says no? Okay, so you say no. Why do you say no?
Because it's not fulfilling. It's not fulfilling. It's not fulfilling each of their needs. If I'm thirsty and I have water, but she's hungry and doesn't have food, then her needs are not being met even though she has water.
But Pat, I didn't ask you all that. I said, is this equal, Pat? Is it equal?
No, it's not equal.
Pat's going to hold the line. Pat, this is the definition of equality. Okay, any math teachers in here? Math teachers? Okay, all of you? That's all you teach in this district is math? A lot of elementary. Okay, there's no secondary teachers in here? Okay. All right, so all of you teach math, right? So my math teachers, is that equal?
Yes.
Okay. It is equal. Okay? It's in fact the working...
Then you changed it.
Oh, now you're going to blame me. Okay, another classic teacher move. This is the definition of equality. Okay? But see, your problem, Pat, is that you blew right past my question. And you changed the question. Okay? You weren't answering the question of is it equal, because of course you know it's equal. You were asking the question, is it fair? And there is nothing in the definition of equality that talks about fairness. Okay? And so if we create an equal education system in the society that we know is radically unequal, then we're going to continue to end up with pretty much the same results we've been getting for a long, long time, which is those who need the most get the least, and those who need the least get the most. Right? But in an equitable system, right, fairness emerges to the top. And your reaction is absolutely right, which is, that's not fair. Okay? Because if she's hungry, we shouldn't be feeding her water, we should be feeding her food. Right? If she gets thirsty, we get her water. Right? Well, that's an equitable system. Okay? The definition of equity is you get what you need when you need it. Right? Now, how would we know, okay, whether or not Summer was thirsty or hungry?
You could ask.
Yeah, we got to ask. Right? Which is not something that we often do with the families and the children that we serve. Okay? We mostly just do to them. Right? We decide what we're going to do, okay, without actually involving them in the conversation about what they want from school. Okay? So the first thing that we do in 10, okay, is to stop this policy reign where executives that frankly couldn't even do our jobs for a day start making decisions about what our jobs are going to look like on the day-to-day. And what we do is we democratize the process. We invert the process. And we ask the people in the school community first, what are the priorities? Okay? And when I say the people in the school community, I mean the primary stakeholders in any given school. And that's children, families, teachers, and admin, site-level admin. Okay? And we determine through that process what are the priorities of that particular school. Okay? Not of your district. District's got your district priorities. We've got our state priorities. Okay? We've got our common core conversation. What we want to know is, we want to ground truth that. We want to know, what does this particular community actually want us to focus on? And then, hey, we can backwards plan into Common Core or hey, whatever the literacy standards are that we're going to try to hit, or whatever it is that we're going to go after. So the way that we do this, hey, is by engaging all of the stakeholders in the community first about these three domains. What do they want most from the school in terms of relationships? What do they want most from the school in terms of relevance? And what do they want most from the school in terms of responsibility? Right? Now these three domains, it's better than a bell. These three domains were actually developed from when we first started this project 8 years ago. It was myself, 3 other teachers, 2 of them from Oakland and 1 of them from San Francisco, and then a bunch of grad students from San Francisco State and UC Berkeley. And what we did is we spent about 2 years doing what's called a lit review. So we looked at about the last 35 years of research on what are the practices, the pedagogies, the skill sets that the most effective teachers have. Okay? What do they do to be so effective? And the research around that, we actually have a pretty significant body of research, and it's fairly commonsensical. I doubt there are very many things that show up in the research that everyday teachers don't already understand really matter. Okay? And what we found, and what we looked for, was recurring themes. And when then we grouped those themes into these 3 domains, because these were the kind of the most populated domains from the last 35 years of research. We were also very intentional when we did that lit review about looking across the political spectrum. Okay? So we looked at some of the most conservative research, we looked at some of the middle of the road stuff, and then we looked at some of the most progressive stuff. Right? So when you actually do, if any of you have done the priority survey yet, right, you will see things that are very much kind of politically status quo mainstream, like test scores. Like really good teachers focus on test scores. Really good teachers dress professionally. Okay? And so we pulled from across the political spectrum, because it's not our job to come into any community and tell the community what's most important. Okay? Our job is to come into the community and ask the community, okay, what's most important. Now, we might share what we think is important, but the purpose of that is to spark curiosity and dialogue, not to make an absolute statement about this works, this doesn't work. Okay? That's really the goal of 10, to figure that out, is to actually ask the people that we serve and the people that are doing the service. Okay? So when you do the priority survey, you, like the students you serve, like the families you serve, and like your site administration, will be asked to determine what are the top priorities in these 3 domains. Okay? And the way that you do it is through an online tool that you can do on your phone, you can do on your laptop, you can do it on a tablet, basically anything that can get you an internet connection. And I had some conversation with some of your administrators today about, so currently the website and the survey are in English and Spanish, because those are the 2 primary language groups that are currently in the network. I know you have some indigenous speakers in growing numbers in your community, and you also have some speakers of languages other than, right, in addition to those, right, indigenous Mexicanos, some other folks that are speaking languages outside of English and Spanish. And I talked to them about a number of ways. I mean, we're in schools in New York, right? I'm from Oakland, and Oakland's the second most racially diverse city in the state of California. Long Beach is got us beat, right? So we've got many languages. And so I talked to them about different ways that you can get those non-Spanish English speakers and some folks that may not even be literate, right? They may not be able to read the survey. This is, right, we're teaching a lot of the same kids around the country. And so there's strategies that you can use, that your school can use, to get the input from them. Nobody in your school community should be excluded from having input in what the priorities are of the school. Okay? Particularly not because of their language or reading ability. So what happens for those that can mainline access the tool is that you'll have a school-wide pin. It's 4 digits. And that will get distributed, and we work with schools, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that schools do this to get high levels of family participation. But the long and the short of it is that they'll put the pin in, okay, and they'll, over time, they'll be taken through 3 phases. Okay? The first phase is what we call the priority survey. Okay? The second phase is what we call the feedback loop, and then the third phase is all teacher-driven, and that's the actual community phase, where you use this input from the community and from your colleagues to bang on your craft. So what happens is that after you survey your community, okay, and again, I'm gonna repeat which stakeholders take this. So it's staff, children, families, and admin. Okay. What will happen is that literally, as soon as you start taking the survey, you'll be able to get real-time data. So no more waiting on your data. When somebody takes the survey, your school's data will change, and you can see it, right? So it's full visibility for you, for all teachers, all the users on any of the school-wide data. And what will happen is once you get I think the threshold is 5. Once you get 5 completed surveys from each of the stakeholder groups, I think the admin is a little bit lower, but what will happen is that those selections will go into what we call an equity algorithm, which weights the actual survey selections by 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Okay, so it's 1/3 students and families, 1/3 teachers, 1/3 admin. Okay, and then that will generate your top 12 for your school. Okay, so you'll get the top 4 in each of the 3 domains.
So student responses are weighted just as strongly as like the parents?
Yes. Yep. So what you'll also be able to do, though, so you can disaggregate some of that, is that you can, so this will aggregate for you in the algorithm, these are your top 12 as a school, but then you can go in, okay, to a separate reporting screen, and you can look at what did my students pick? What did my parents pick? What did staff pick? What did admin pick? And you can then get really granular. So you can look at what did my girls pick? What did my Spanish-speaking families pick? Right? What did my black boys pick? Okay, so you can disaggregate the data on all kinds of different levels to get very specific insights into what different student groups, what different family groups, what different staff groups found most important. Okay? And then this opens up a dialogue that schools can't currently have, which is what's most important to our families, what's most important to us, where are those actually aligning, so where do we already have low-hanging fruit that we can rally together around, and where are we misaligned? And we don't aim to resolve the misalignment. We aim to surface it, okay? Because the not talking about the ways in which schools are misaligned with community and communities misaligned with schools is one of the major points of friction right now, okay, inside of schools, particularly those schools who are serving poor and working class and children of color. Okay? And so the idea is to lift up and say, where are the places, what are the things that kids and families are saying are most important, and the things that we're not accounting for. And what are the things that we're saying are most important that kids and families aren't accounting for? And then to have some dialogue around that. And what we find in those dialogues is typically one of 2 things. Sometimes it's literally different priorities. Okay? And then a really meaningful dialogue can open up that allows families to really ask us, why are you picking that? Right? Why is that so important to you as educators? And it allows us to ask families, why are you picking that? And why are we not picking that? Okay? And what is that, right, disconnect about? Sometimes what we find is you're actually picking the same thing, you just use a different lexicon. And so what appears to be a data discord is actually a data alignment. Right? And the only way that you begin to surface that, right, is if you start having dialogue about what the community picked and what we picked as educators. So, excuse me, okay. I misspoke. Its faculty admin is 33%, students are 33%, and families are 33%. Okay, that's the rating, the algorithm weighting. So there's typically 5 levels at which you can have a conversation with your colleagues and with the community around this priorities data. Right? The schools that have been with us the longest, which is schools that are now entering into their 4th year, they're typically doing at least 4 or 5 of these levels. The schools that are just starting with us, they typically will do maybe level 1 and 2, maybe just level 1, until they get their skill and their will up around having these kind of dialogues. But typically, right, the level 1 is just the teacher level conversation, right? You all investigating what did you pick, what did your families pick, what did your children pick, what did your colleagues pick. The second tier, which does typically happen with most schools in their first year with us, is in that conversation, we'll leave the individual teacher and they'll go into your PLCs, right? Or your grade level teams, or however you're organized in terms of your professional development structure. The schools that are into their second and third year, then they'll typically do that also in an all-staff meeting. So they'll have some individual work around it. They'll talk about it in smaller groups in their PLCs, and then they'll talk about it as entire staff. Okay? The more advanced schools will then have a whole stakeholder conversation. Well, they'll have a night where they bring together folks. They want to talk about the priorities. They'll get some food. They'll get some child care. They'll get some translation services. And then they'll have a whole community discussion, okay, about the priorities. And then the last level, and again, this is largely teacher-driven, but there's a number of teachers who then bring the priorities back to their classroom, and they have a conversation with their students, okay, about what got picked. And what that allows you to do is nuance this data to your classroom level. So one of the qualities that's very frequently picked is builds trusting relationships with students and families. Okay? That's oftentimes selected under the relationships domain. Well, there's a general sense about what that means, right? But when you start talking to kids about it, and the kids that you're working with every day, what you'll find is there's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of granularity, that what certain students want and how they think about trusting relationships is different than the kids sitting next to them, right? And so what that allows you to do is to nuance your toolbox and understand that some kids need the, I mean, y'all are teachers, you know, some kids need the hammer and some kids need the wrench and some kids need the back of the hand. So, what happens next is that twice a year, okay, most schools do this twice a year. Some schools are a little more ambitious and try to do it every trimester. But most schools do it twice a year, usually around the winter break or right when you come back from winter break, and then towards the end of the year. So twice a year, each teacher that is participating in TIN will get feedback from those same stakeholders. Okay? Now the most important thing for you to know about your feedback is that nobody can see your feedback but you. Not even us. Okay? We are locked out of being able to access your data. Your admin can't see it, your peers can't see it, your families can't see it unless you share it. Okay, now we aim to create school cultures where teachers are sharing their feedback data, because that feedback data is really what's going to help you really improve your practice. But you choose what you share, you choose when you share it, and you choose who you share it with. Okay, so what happens in the feedback loop is that there's two parts to it. First, you feedback on yourself. Okay, so you evaluate yourself on the 12 priorities that the community picked. Okay, and then you get feedback from your students, from your families, and from select colleagues. Okay, so one of the things that we work really hard with schools to do is to start doing peer-to-peer classroom observations, peer-to-peer coaching, peer-to-peer sharing, and peer-to-peer feedback. Okay, so what will happen is that folks will go into the feedback loop and they'll be asked to give you a rating on each of the 12 from excellent to needs improvement. Right, and then there's I think it's needs improvement, okay, good, excellent are the 4 ratings. And then after they say, okay, you're good, Pat's good at this, right? Then what happens is a dialog box pops up, and there's an opportunity for the person giving you feedback to give you narrative, to talk about why you're good at this, right? What are the specific parts of your practice that make you good at building trusting relationships? And the same thing happens for all the people that are giving you feedback. The people that give you feedback can choose to name themselves, or they can be anonymous. Okay. And what I found as I've used the tool and with the teachers at the school where I work is that kids oftentimes want to put their name in there. Okay? Because kids are incredibly kind and generous to us when they give us feedback. I'm shocked. I'm always thinking I'm going to get slammed by my students. And then there's like, all these, and sometimes the comments are kind of corny, but, right, there's always, right, this wonderful kind of appreciation, right, of the things that I'm doing well as a teacher. But what's also really helpful about about the narrative and the feedback is it's specific to you, okay? And it's specific to you through the lens, through multiple lenses. Okay, so inevitably, right, we know the gold standard of instruction for probably close to 3 decades now has been differentiated instruction. Okay, we've known this for a long, long time. The most skilled teachers differentiate. Well, when you start hearing that there's certain ways in which your differentiation is working for student A and not student B, right, then you can differentiate even tighter, right? And that's probably, in my experience as a teacher, the most useful part of this feedback is it's specific to my classroom, okay? It's not generalized feedback on an outcome. It's direct feedback on a process. And most of the data that I've been given as a teacher to improve my practice is outcome data. And there is nothing in the systems change research that suggests that any system should be using outcome data to improve itself. Because if you use outcome data to improve your practice, you're mostly guessing, right? So as an example, if your kids score poorly on a fractions portion of an exam, right, what does that mean you're not doing well? That's sort of the common sense leap of logic, right? But the research doesn't actually bear that out. Because you all know, there's so many different factors that go into whether or not the kid is learning fractions. You may be teaching your fractions ass off. I mean, you may be the dopest fraction teacher in the history of fractions teachers, but you don't have a good relationship with that kid. And so we send you to a fractions workshop, and you learn some more fractioning teaching. Right? And then you come back and you're using all these new fractions techniques. And what happens to the test score? It doesn't move because it wasn't your fractions teaching that was the issue. It was your relationship. Right? And that's why outcome data is only useful when you pair it with process data. What is actually happening in my class every day? How are the students actually experiencing this? How are professional educators that are observing me experiencing this? How are the families that are supposed to be supporting kids at home actually experiencing this? That mix of feedback, the dynamics of that mix, allows you to get much more granular when you think about what you want to work on in your practice. Right? And it's that ability to get granular in data that allows you to make quick, rapid cycles of change. Okay? And I used to get this data as a teacher. And the way I would do it was at the end of every literature unit that I taught. I was an English teacher, okay? And most of my units were 6 to 8 weeks long. And at the end of each unit, what I would do is I would randomly select 5 to 7 kids from first period or whatever class we finished the unit in, and I would buy them pizza. And they would come to lunch with me, and we would sit in a circle during lunch, and we would eat pizza together, and I would ask them 3 questions, and I would videotape it. This is when they had like the big-ass VHS tape, remember that thing, right? So I would set it up, and I would videotape this pizza circle with the kids. And I asked them 3 things. I would say, what did you like about the unit? Because like any teacher, I like to get positive strokes, right, sometimes. So I'd start with the good. What'd you like? And then I ask them, what didn't you like? And then I ask them the magic wand question. If you could change anything about this 6 to 8 weeks, what would you change and why? That's the best PD I've ever gotten in my career. Because their insights were so on the money. And I would typically get 2 kinds of useful feedback from there. One was things I was doing every day that I could change tomorrow. Okay, little things. I'll give you one example. One girl told me she was like one of the most powerful students I've ever taught. Her name was Stephanie. And I had gone to this whack-ass PD where they taught me all this new science about how we arrange our classroom. And this is when group work was all the rage, right? Everybody's doing group work, right? And so I had come back and I had rearranged my class into these groups. And in the process, I didn't actually change the way in which I was like giving directions during class or running dialogue circles, right? So what ended up happening was, because of the way I arranged the room with these new like science-based, right, groupings, inevitably some group of kids was at my back. And for whatever reason, I kept teaching to the left side of the class. Call it my political leaning, right? But I would, right? So I'm leaning into the left all the time. And where's Stephanie sitting? Right. And Stephanie was in on every single dialogue. Every time. This girl has something to say. And she's in her seat doing this. And what can I see? So what'd she do? Checked out. You never see me. I'm trying to participate. You never see me. And I had a blind spot. I love Stephanie. I love all my students, except the ones I want to kill. Right? But I had a blind spot. And without feedback from her, and there was nothing in my professional day that was getting me consistent feedback from my students, that blind spot would have remained. Okay? So the idea of this, is to make this much easier, and you don't have to buy any pizza. So the other thing that will happen when you get your feedback is you can do the same thing you do with the priority survey. You can disaggregate it. So you can look at what are the trends for my girls, what are the trends for my boys, what are the trends for my Spanish speakers, what are the trends for my English speakers, what are the trends for my Latino kids, what are the trends for my black kids, what are the trends for my Vietnamese kids. Okay, so you can begin to disaggregate both across stakeholder groups and then across subgroups inside of that stakeholder group to get a much more nuanced picture about who are the students that you're really hitting home with and who are the students you're missing on. And then the narrative will reveal for you some of the reasons why you are hitting home so that you can double down on that. And it'll also reveal for you some of the places where you're missing the mark, and you can begin to chip away at that, as I did with the next day. By the way, I rearranged my desks. Okay? I also changed where I positioned myself in the room. So, as I said, most schools do the feedback loop twice. They do it around winter break and they do it at the end of the year. When you do your first feedback loop, you will already be in a cycle of praxis. Okay, so when we talk about PLCs, we've actually appropriated the P, okay, because typically PLCs stand for something like professional learning communities, right? The P, the way we use that P in the acronym is to talk about praxis. Okay, so praxis is a long-standing term of critical development, which basically combines the word practice and action and reflection. Okay, so it's a cycle of reflecting, acting, reflecting, acting. Okay, so you're constantly in this cycle of trying out new things, getting feedback, tightening it up, throwing some stuff out, including some new stuff. So in your PLCs, when we talk to schools and districts that want to be in the network, one of the things that we say is teachers have to have a tremendous amount of autonomy in the PLCs. You can't script PLCs. And you can't expect PLC 1 to be on the exact same page as PLC 2. We're not robots, right? We're not widgets, and we have different challenges around our practice. And in order for us to really wrestle free of those, you've got to give us professional autonomy to decide how we're using some of that collaboration time. Okay? And so the one little bit of script that we give to schools to launch their PLCs so that there's a common foundation is these 4 activities. And I know some of you have already done the teaching philosophy one. But it starts, PLCs start with what we call the teaching philosophy. And the idea of the teaching philosophy is that one of the first things that was taken from me as a teacher was my right to dream. My right to dream about what my classroom could be. My right to dream about how my class period could run. Right? And it became more and more scripted as I got deeper into the profession. And so the first thing that we do with the schools that we work with is to ask you to dream again. Okay, so the first activity that you the first direct 10 activity you will do in your PLC is to write a teaching philosophy. And the teaching philosophy basically answers the question, why do you teach? And what we find is that when you ask teachers that question, they set the bar, we set the bar on ourselves so much higher than any administrator ever would. And it's our bar. And I've never heard a teacher say, like, my goal is to kick as many kids out as I can. My goal is to flunk as many kids. I've never heard a teacher say that. Right? And yet, some of us, self-included, are still doing it. So the question is why? Why aren't we our best selves every day? Well, part of the reason why is because we're never asked who our best self is. And if you don't get to narrate who you want to be, it's really hard to keep your vision on that teacher. Right? And so what you become is a teacher that responds to the external pressures. And I was becoming that teacher. And then I had a master teacher ask me that question and sit me down in this exercise. And it transformed my relationship to the profession. Because I was reminded of who I started teaching when I was 20. Westlake Middle School. 7th grade hell. But it's all right because I was 20, which means I had rocket fuel every day, so I could keep up with it. But I started teaching when I was 20. Right? And I said that I started teaching because I wanted to become the teacher I never had. And because I was that kid. Right? In elementary school, I shit you not, I literally had a chair in the principal's office with my name on it. Literally, right? It was just for me. Nobody else got to sit in that chair. So I was that kid. Right? And a lot of the reason why I was that kid is because I wasn't connected with my teachers, because there was stuff going on for me in the streets, there was stuff going on for me at home, unspeakable things. And I would carry that into the school, right? And no one was asking me about it. So when I'm blowing up the classroom, I'm breaking things, right? All they had for me was put him in anger management. And I did have anger problems. But the fix for my anger problems wasn't anger management. The fix for my anger problems was healing. Right? Vulnerability, attached relationships. And by the time I got to 6th grade, I found that teacher. Her name was Janita. She saved my life. She's still in my life today. She knows the work that I do now. And I wanted to be that teacher. I wanted to make sure that no kids passed through my neighborhood again that didn't experience that teacher at least once. And not long into my practice, right, I lost that true north. I couldn't find my compass anymore. And I found myself reading and reacting to district initiatives, right, the latest, greatest, Pearson fix. And I lost my way because I lost my dream. And then I had a master teacher, right, take me through this exercise. And it transformed me. And I became the teacher that I always wanted to be. And I'm still working on it. I'm still growing. Right? I still have homicidal thoughts about children. Sometimes even my own. But that's why we start with that, with the teaching philosophy. Because it's important that as professional educators, we consistently reset and remind ourselves about that 20-year-old, naive, supremely hopeful, frequently intoxicated self. And the more you can keep your thumb on that person, the more likely you're consistently pursuing that every day and holding your colleagues to that. Right? And that's the other piece. Because if I teach next to you every day, I mean, we're banging on it every day, and I don't actually know who you really want to be as a teacher, and you don't know who I really want to be as a teacher, I can't really support you with anything except the mechanics of teaching. When you've been teaching a day, you know that at the end of the day, teaching and learning always boils down to the heart space to get to the head space. You got to win the heart to get to the head, particularly with the kids who are the most wounded, right? Because they're going to lock you out of their head. Too risky to let you in there. So you got to win through the heart. But what I find is there's not enough of an adult culture that's committed to that. We don't model that with each other. We don't hold each other in that way. And part of that is because we don't have these kinds of conversations in PD. We stay focused on the mechanics of instruction. Right? And so we become good at the mechanics. Right? And that works for kids who are showing up whole, right? Who can just deal with the mechanics, but the wounded ones that need something much more than the mechanics of fractions. We can't go there with them if we can't go there with each other. And it's unfair to ask teachers to hold that connection and that weight and then not have other adult relationships that can help carry some of that weight. I got to be able to come to you, brother, and say, I need you to carry some of this weight for me today, because we're in this together. And if this hallway's going to be right, you got to be right and I got to be right. And that means we got to have right kinds of conversations. That should be part of PD. You can woo on that. Right? So, as that gets laid down, right, and we narrate to each other, this is who I really want to be. Hold me to this. Right? Help me reach this vision of my best self as an educator. Right? Then we look at the data. So, okay, this is who you want to be, right? How does that match up with who the community wants you to be? Where is your mission and the community's mission aligned, and where's it misaligned? And what is that about? The third activity is then to say, okay, this is who you want to be, this is the community needs you to be, this is who you are right now. Okay? And whoever you are right now is great. Whoever you are as a teacher right now, you're good. You just can't stay there. Okay? And so, in order to figure out where you need to go, you got to figure out where are you? Okay? Where are you at? Once you know where you're at, then you can figure out what your next move is. And that's the third piece. I don't know why this damn thing keeps doing this. And then the fourth activity is that you develop a growth plan with your colleagues. In order for me to get from where I am to who I want to be, these are the things I'm going to work on. These are the things, Pat, I need you to help me focus on. Okay? And what we say is that every teacher in 10 has their own IEP. One of my biggest critiques of PD is that we have known, as I said earlier, that for 3 decades, the gold standard of instruction is differentiated instruction. And then we do whole class instruction for PD, a la this. Okay? And it's absurd. Okay? So I understand the absurdity of what I'm doing right now. I am literally undermining my own message. Okay? So the idea of 10 is to say that we don't all need the same professional development. Now, we might be able to identify things across the school that we all need PD on. Okay? And that makes sense. Okay, let's do a whole school PD on that. But for the most part, what we need to be able to do is identify at the classroom level, what does this teacher need support with, and what are the growth areas that they want to work on. Okay? And that's the idea of the growth plan, is that teachers get professionalized again, to be able to say, right, these are the things that I really want to bang on in my craft. Right? And then you work with your colleagues on those things. And then you get feedback on it. How did those things that you invested in move the meter for children in your classroom? Okay? And the last, once you've got this base set up, everybody's got a growth plan, then what happens is that every PLC sets up their own circuit of activities. So each meeting, the teachers have decided, this is how we're going to spend our time today. Right? We're going to watch this documentary film. We're going to read this book. We're going to share back from this training you went to. We're going to look at student work. We're going to plan curriculum together. We're going to have dialogue about the earthquake that this dude from Oakland brought. Whatever it is, okay? The teachers are deciding what's driving your professional discourse. Okay? Because you know best what your problems of practice are in the classroom. So you should be identifying the things that are going to be the most useful for you to respond to those. Now, in the event that you're in your PLC, you're like, man, a lot of us are struggling with X, right? This particular kind of student behavior, this particular kind of literacy challenge, this particular kind of math challenge. And the group can't unlock it. That's where the network's valuable. Because you can lift that up to the network and say, hey, we're really struggling with kids that are coming in with high levels of trauma. Is there anybody in the 10 network that has some good resources for us? And now it's teachers teaching teachers. Yeah, we had this dope trauma training from Bruce Perry. We read The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. You guys should check that out. Okay? And here's our email. And now let's start some cross-dialogue between how we're handling New York and how we're handling Santa Maria. Punto. Okay. Questions? This is that cycle. Okay, is praxis. So you'll do a circuit of activities, right, and then you'll do another circuit of activities, and you'll stay in that loop until it's feedback time. Okay. So then May comes around, you get another feedback loop, and then you go back through this. You revisit your philosophy, you revisit the priorities, you revisit the feedback analysis, and you do growth plan 2.0. So every year, every teacher gets 2 IEPs. You have your fall IEP and you have your spring IEP. So every mid-year, there's an identified set of things that you say as a teacher, this is what I'm working on. And then every summer, when you go on break, okay, you've identified a set of things that you want to be thinking about over the summer to come back in the fall even stronger. Okay? And then that cycle just continues over time. Let me stop there and see, what are your questions? What are your comments, concerns? Yeah. Can you tell me your name?
My name is Brian Holcomb, and I teach fifth grade at the school. It sounds like that we're looking for parents to take an initial survey, and then they are part of that feedback loop 2 other times during the year. So it's 3 total online entries from our parents.
For parents, students, colleagues, and colleagues we consider both your peers, like teacher to teacher, and admin.
Okay.
Yep. And that how that shakes out on the colleague side is really dynamically decided school to school to school, right? So some schools include a whole bunch of teachers, right, giving each other feedback. Some schools you have 1 peer teacher in your PLC. It just depends on how you all set it up. There's no limits, right, in the system, right? It's really driven by the site. Other questions? Yeah.
My name is Jose Segura. I teach over at middle school.
Nice to meet you.
How do we, so I'm just trying to think of this like cognitively. You opened up by telling us that we have folks who are not in the trenches with us, or essentially giving us what they believe to be best practice and what we should do. They're not walking in our shoes. But the survey essentially is asking people who are not in our shoes to give input on how we should do our job. So I'm having difficulty kind of wrapping my head around that. What's the difference if it's an administrator downtown or a parent down the street providing input into the work that I do, because neither of those people are in my room with me and my kids every day.
Yeah. So first of all, we serve parents, right? So they are our client, and so it's important that we get feedback, right, from those folks. I've never experienced in this an effort to tell teachers what to do. What is typically happening in the feedback loop is you're getting insight into how what you're doing is impacting the different stakeholders, right? So what is the stuff that you're doing that's having a positive impact, and what's some of the stuff that you're doing that is not having a positive impact? And that level of, and then it gets, you also have to think about the value of an array of feedback as opposed to an individual feedback, right? So one person, who I was having this conversation with your administrators, that it's crazy, right, to think that an administrator could come in a snapshot of time and give you a thorough evaluation, right? Because they don't know what happened the hour before, let alone the week before, let alone the month before, and they don't know what happens next, right? And so, now, I've had administrators that actually gave me really good feedback. I've had administrators that gave me shit feedback, right? But so I know it's possible. Like as a master teacher, I can go into a teacher's classroom and I can give them some feedback in fairly short order, right? But what I have found the most useful is when I get a lot of voices, okay? And then I can sort of, and what happens is that inevitably you've got outlier voices, right? That you might have beef with, you might been ineffective with them, or they might have been ineffective with you. But those end up as outliers, right? What you start to see when you get large input on your practice is trends, right? And it's the trends that you can really use to drive the things that you want to improve on, and to double down on the things that you know, according to the trends, are highly effective. Right? So it's not about, I think the tendency, and this is why we call it a feedback loop and not an evaluation loop, because it's not evaluative. Right? That's not the goal. The goal is to increase the amount of feedback that we're getting as practitioners so that we can know what's working, why it's working, and how it's working, and what's not working, and why it's not working, and how it's not working, and go to work on that with our colleagues.
Do you find that you get quality feedback from the younger kids? My students are 8.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a trip. Like, I had the same question, right? Because I mostly taught secondary.
Yeah.
My last 3 years have been in elementary school, and it's just like, first of all, just bow down to elementary school teachers, because I just had no idea. Right? my first, okay, I got to tell you my kinder story. My first day in kinder, okay, I go into the bathroom, because there was a child missing in the first place. When a child missing, apparently, when you're a kid. I have twin boys that are 4.5, so that's usually where I go looking first, too. So I go to the bathroom, and there's this little boy who's standing there, and his pants are down around his ankles, his chonies are down around his ankles, and he's standing there like this. Okay? So, now mind you, right, I've been a high school teacher for a long time, so that, like, low-key freaks me out. Like, there's this naked child standing in front of me, like, run away? Is that what? So I look a little more closely, and what I realize is that his hands have poop on them. Okay? You with me so far? I wasn't laughing. I was like, is that poop? And he literally looks at me. Okay? This is like his first week of kinder. First contact ever with school. Right? Hands full of poop. Looking at this dude. Right? And he looks at me and says, he literally says, help me. I'm like, all right, I got you. Just stay still. Stay still. So I get around him, right? And I start getting the toilet paper out. And I start cleaning his hands. Okay? And I get emotional when I talk about this because he leans into me. And first of all, I only had one hand clean. And at that point, I was just like I'm gonna get poop on me, right? So he leans in, he leans on me, right? And he says, gracias, tío. And I realized that that's how they come to us. No real clear separation between the familia and the school. And then they get to be in ninth grade. And they're so disconnected from us. And that was, first of all, just mad respect to kinder teachers. Because I know I am not the only kinder poop experience. Just super humbling, right? Super humbling. But also super humbling for me, right, as a teacher of older kids too. To not lose track of, right, how they come to us and that innocence, and this system, right, that we're working inside of. I sometimes feel like has lost track of why we came in to do this work. And all the conversation about test scores and outcomes and shit, I didn't sign up to raise test scores. I signed up to save and change lives. And I know there's a relationship. I'm certain about that, right? But my primary responsibility, I mean, look, y'all, the people that were directly responsible for the collapse of the banking industry and the housing market had the highest test scores in the country. Them cats all went to the most elite universities, but they lacked a moral compass. And I don't want to participate in that. I don't want to be a part of that profession, because that's not the profession that I understand teaching to be. And I think in order to catapult ourselves out of that soup that we've been dropped into, we got to be really committed as educators to galvanizing those voices that says, thank you, Theo. And for me, that's always the most meaningful part of the feedback loop, is these comments that the children leave, the third graders. You know, their insights into what we do that are working for them. I mean, you know, you teach them, right? They're profound. They have dope insights. We just never bring them out of them. Now, what the younger grade teachers tend to do, so we have kindergarten teachers who use this all the way up, right? But obviously in kindergarten, they're not writing you, you know, a 5-paragraph essay about how great you are at building caring relationships, and that was awesome when you cleaned my poop. Right? I wish I had data on that. Like, what do you mean I don't get a raise? I clean poop! But, so what the younger grade teachers do, and you can kind of do this on a case-by-case basis, but because what you're really looking to do, and first of all, like 8-year-olds oftentimes lack a filter, right? So they'll straight up critique you, not even knowing they're critiquing you, right? So what some of the lower grade teachers do is they'll literally, right, have this as a part of a student conference, where they'll ask the students the questions, and they'll type in the students' answers. Now, from like straight up methodological perspective, that's super suspect, because when they say something bad, just be like, and he said it was awesome, right? So, you know, you deal with that however you want, right? I want critical feedback from my students, right? I want the positive feedback too. But if you've got kids that are too young to actually create narrative, then you can go into the system, right, and get that and ask them the questions and get feedback from them in a way that's meaningful. Right? And we've also had teachers that actually bring a colleague in. And the colleague does it because the teacher's worried that the kids won't be honest with me, you know, because like they don't want to hurt my feelings or they don't want me to be mad at them. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But typically from 3rd grade up, the students are fairly independent to be able to give you some decent feedback. Yeah. Can you say your name, please?
In regard to the 12 areas in the 3 domains. And are those 12 items school-wide or for just your class?
School-wide. Okay? So the school community decides on the top 12 priorities. And then that's why one of the 5 ways that you can use the priorities data is to then have a conversation with your students in your classroom and your families in your classroom about what do these things mean to you, right? How do I nuance it down to the classroom level, because this was selected by our entire school community, and then it's 4. It's the top 4 in each of the 3 domains. So it's not 12. It's 12 in total. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
My name is Catherine Bott. I'm a third grade Illinois. And my question, in order for me to buy into this 10 process, I have to have trust in the leaders, which would be you and Dr. Bianco Dubalo. When she spoke to us last month, I had a lot of concerns about her message. And I'm not the only one, which I'm sure you know, I'm sure you've heard. I'm not the only one. And so my question is, I'm confused. I don't understand what her presentation has to do with 10. I want to know if her presentation represents the values of 10, and does it represent your values? Because some of the things that she said were very, I felt, they did not coincide with my values as a teacher and as a person.
So what I can tell you, I can't respond to specific things that she said when she was here because I wasn't here.
Right.
And what I can tell you is I would not be working closely with her if I didn't have a tremendous amount of respect for her. And if I had any questions about her values and the way in which she supports teachers and the way in which she supports children and the way in which she supports families, then I wouldn't work with her. Right? So just off top, I have absolutely no questions about her integrity and about her commitment to supporting teachers. So, beyond that, like I don't know specifically what were the issues, right, that you had with her piece. I've never actually sought to partner with people that I have full values alignment with, right? I don't mind if there's some discontinuity there, right? I get curious about those things, right? And so what I would encourage you to do is to reach directly to her, right? And ask her, say, hey, like some of the stuff you said, right, got me on my heels a little bit. Like it made me, I wasn't feeling it. Can we have a dialogue? And I guarantee you, she will make the time to pick up the phone and call you directly and have a dialogue with you. Teacher to teacher, right? Human being to human being. And so will I. If there's anything that I said, like if you don't like me talking about poop, like let me know, right? But I think what I don't want you to ever do in your relationship with us is to hold back concern or critique. Okay? And we may not agree on everything. Right? And the truth is that the real impact of your work with 10 is going to be in your work with your colleagues and your work with your community, right? We're more of a kind of backdrop, right, supporting structure where if you guys are surfacing things that you need support with, then we have a national network of folks that we can help to get you that support. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say beyond that. I 100%, right, vouch for Allison and her integrity as a teacher and as a community member. And I really do encourage you to reach out. My guess is that what you think she might have meant, if it was offensive to you, it probably wasn't what she meant. And there could just frankly be something lost in translation or lost in presentation that it could be cleared up with a dialogue.
So we're going to have 2 more presentations from 10, right? As your school group. What are those? Do we have a plan for what those presentations are, and how do they relate? Like what she presented to us did not really. It was different from what you're presenting today. She presented more philosophy.
Yeah.
You're presenting process.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to hear at the next 2? Philosophy or process?
So you should have had the process first. That's why I started by apologizing to you. And I think it was communicated earlier. There was a miscommunication, right? That we thought you all had already been introduced to the process. So this should have preceded any philosophical discussion, right, about community responsiveness or equity or any of those things. So that might have made it feel a little disjointed. Like, how does this connect to what we're going to do? And in the next 2 sessions, typically what happens, and I don't even think we've specifically defined, right, what those 2 sessions are yet, because we don't know what your data is yet. We don't know what it is that your community and when I say community, I mean y'all, right? You as teachers, your students, your families are lifting up, right? So I wouldn't presume to come in here and say, well, okay, then the talk that we're going to do for you is X, when what you really need is Y. Well, the only way we know what your community needs from us is if your community speaks, okay? And so as that emerges and trends emerge for you all, and I really encourage you, if there's particular things that you want as educators, support them, then voice that to your administration, and your administration can let us know. And it may not be me. Like, you may be asking for something, you know, that it's not my wheelhouse. It's not my area of research. It's not my area of practice. In which case, then we'll bring in somebody, right, from our network that we feel like can actually meet your need. What we don't like to do is to walk in with a script. I've been teaching too long. Scripts don't work, right? The first thing you got to do is some ethnographic work on what does the community actually need, and then you start figuring out how we bring that support to you. So, you know, open invitation for you, to any of you, to email me directly if there's particular things that you. Let me just put it up here real quick. If you look me up online, you could get any number of emails. That's just the one that just popped into my head. But any of those emails will be valid. They'll all go to the same place. But if there's particular things that you would like to see, or challenges, right, from anybody, share them. Right? I'm an educator, which means I'm a student. So I'm always learning. I'm always growing. And I'm always interested, and I'm always curious about what's working for folks and what's not. Okay? And we won't always agree, but we will be able to agree at the end of the day that we're committed to the same things, which is amazing outcomes for kids and families. Yeah.
Mike Schaefer, Fessler Junior High. Thanks so much for coming. I appreciate it. And I did write you a rather long, detailed email, but my wife made me delete it. So,
Who's your wife? Who's your wife?
No, she ain't in here. So that's why you didn't get it.
Okay.
We're all on the same team. I do respect you. I appreciate it very much. But as teammates sometimes have to scrimmage a little, so maybe I'll scrimmage a bit here. The first thing I'd like to request is, maybe this is an oversight, I'd like to request that we have a chance to evaluate each and every session that Tim presents to us.
Okay.
That's the way we've normally done it in the school district.
Cool.
That's the way we've normally done it in the school district, and so we'd like to have that. So this issue of the, I don't recall her name, the other...
Allison,
that she came and presented. If you're not familiar with what she presented, if you had our feedback, maybe you would see that. And I think that would be important, I really do.
Agreed.
And just briefly, since you weren't there, the feeling I've heard from people, and the gut feeling I got, just to put it in a general way, is that she didn't know the Santa Maria Valley. She didn't know us. It didn't feel like Tim had, I apologize, it's nothing personal, I have tons of respect.
You want to
I didn't feel like Tim spent any time coming and learning who Santa Maria Valley was, who our school board was, who our children were, who our parents were, who our families were, who we as teachers are. And I feel like that's got to be the number one thing. And I would really like that first. Because there's some things that are like, yeah, we're in agreement. And there's some things like, ooh, maybe this isn't us in our approach. So that's the first thing of that. Secondly, I'm a little confused how this whole process came along, because it so seems like you're all about democracy, and we want to get your buy-in and your feedback and be a part of this. Nobody ever asked me what I wanted for my school. Nobody ever asked me what is the best training you want. Nobody ever said, here's 3 trainings. Which one do you think is best? Which one do you think will be... I think I would like, as an educator, to have just some little bit of a feedback, some little bit of choice in what's best for us. Maybe this is best, but maybe there's something else. I'd like that feedback. But anyway, those are my main things. Again, thank you so much for what you've done. Your TED Talk brought me to tears and validated what I do as a teacher, and I love it. So thank you so much. I like those.
Thank you, and thank you for the feedback. Thank you. Anybody else want to bang on me? That was beautiful, man. I love it. Thank you. No, seriously, thank you. Sure.
So a lot of change.
Can you tell us your name?
My name is Sarah O'Connor, and I'm a fifth grade teacher. A lot is changing in the educational world, pedagogically and in every way. And a lot of the infrastructure is changing and moving. And I just want to know, 10 or not 10, what's most exciting for you? What are the positive changes going on now that you're most excited about, and why that is exciting?
So, could you all hear the question? Okay. Tell me your name again?
Sarah.
Sarah was saying that she was just inquiring for my reflections on what's, given all the changes that are going on in education right now, what's most exciting for me? Poop. No. I think probably it's, I get to work with a lot of teachers and a lot of schools, and the appetite for the conversation about equity is growing rapidly. Like, I can remember even around the time I did the TED Talk, where those conversations were much more marginal than they are right now, right? And it excites me, but it also makes me nervous, right? Because I think that things, when they get inside of large systems and institutions, they tend to flatten out, right? They lose they stop being dynamic. But I think that the thing that excites me most is the number of teachers that I see on the ground every day that are really interrogating their practice with their colleagues around conversations of equity. And I mean, it's like across our professional spectrum, right? So it's early career folks, it's mid-career folks, it's veterans, and that's really exciting to me, because for most of my career, those groups were often in different camps, right? And the way in which we were rolling out our practice, we almost never got to dialogue together. And my best PD came from kids and some of the veteran teachers that just like picked me up, right? So, I'm an eminently hopeful dude. I live on the 3400 block of East Oakland, which is one of the most violent communities in the United States. My sons are 4.5 years old, and by the time they were 3, they'd already seen a homicide. They already saw our neighbor get killed in the street. And yet those children in my community, and I've heard that y'all are starting to pick up some of this violence, right? And yet these babies come every day, like through all that shit, and they still see me as their P1, and so my thing is, like, I'm always trying to match the hope levels of the babies I work with. They're what I'm most hopeful about, is that they have every reason to doubt, especially now with all the stuff that's going on. They have every reason to doubt, and yet they show up every day still believing in us, still believing in something bigger than themselves. And I think at the end of the day, that's why I've been in it for so long. And that's why I still have this level of passion and energy about teaching, is because I'm around young people every day. And I just try to soak that up, right? And all of it, like just the rawness, of how they come to us, to me is beautiful. And it makes me hopeful in the fact that teachers are starting to drink from that glass more often now in our professional conversations. That makes me pretty excited about what might happen next. Right? I will add that what worries me is some of what you said, right? The fact that we still don't have a lot of professional autonomy. And it's one of the reasons why we insist in the places that we partner that teachers get a tremendous amount of professional autonomy if they're going to be part of this network. We don't want to work with schools and districts that are dictating the teachers all the time right, what their PD, right? My promise to you is to push. Okay? I will push, and if y'all are not feeling that push, okay? Push on me, and I will push. I'm saying it to your face right now, that we are pushing districts, okay, to do better with teachers. Okay? Because I push myself, and I push my colleagues to do better, right? But we have to be able to push too, right? And our voice has to be present, and the voice of our children and our families has to be present if we're going to figure this thing out. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones in the dirt trying to grow those roses. Yeah. Well, so I think those are the kind of questions that we can do advocacy for you around. Okay, so like that comment, right? Like I need more iPads to be able to effectively, right, do this, right? That's a very concrete thing, right, that I can push on, right, with your principal, with your central office administration, right, as somebody who's part of my responsibility is to advocate, right, for the teachers in our network, right? Now, so the more kind of direct stuff that you like, hey, we want a feedback form for every session, right? That y'all, cool, done, on it, right? I need more, cool, right? Now, I can't promise you that tomorrow there's going to be 30 iPads that show up, but what I can promise you is that concern will be lifted, okay? And I will speak that as much as I can.
Two of my peers do not have. You're changing the subject of
Hold on, it's all right.
To interrupt me. So the other concern, if you can push back, that's what we're hoping for.
Okay, yeah.
That's what, like, okay, that would be really, really good. But there's lots of different concerns, except for with me. I don't have that concern for air conditioning because somebody else has. But my kids, when we do LCLD and they change and they come in and, oh, this is so glad to have CLD. That, they don't have that all day long. My students have that all day. They do not know what it's like to be hot and tired and having to spray with water. That's what I'm saying. I'm hoping you can help us.
Yeah.
That's what I want from you.
Okay.
I hope you can do it.
I will advocate for you. I can't promise you air conditioning or iPad, right? What I can promise is I will advocate, and I can promise, right, that our primary focus, right, is to create meaningful, right, teacher development, right, which includes teacher voice, right? Yeah.
Do your surveys have that type of question in there? Like, do you value for the parents and the students and the teachers to answer, is technology a part, is an important need for you? And so that would be elevated up to the top.
That's absolutely right.
We could then have.
That's absolutely right. And then and so I don't know if everybody heard the question, but the question was like, is one of the qualities that students and families and teachers can pick in the 52 priorities, technology, right? Yes, it is, right? Because there's research that suggests that, right, technology can improve learning, right? So if your community, right, lifts that up, you also get data around that, right? You get to say, hey, 100 families, right, said this. And your principal's going to see it. Y'all are going to be looking at the same data, right? Now you have data coming from the community, coming from your voices about what's most important, right? And look, hey, data's the coin of the realm right now. The problem is that, look, I'm not from here, okay? I'm from Oakland. So to get from the Fairfield Inn, Fairfield Inn, okay, to here, okay, we had to use this. Okay, my personal preference is Waze, but maybe some Google Mappers in here, but I use Waze, right? So we put in the address, okay, to get here, and we got here because we put in the right address. which means that I put what into my ways? I put data. What would have happened if I put the wrong address? Y'all be like, 10. We're not doing 10 at all. These dudes don't even show up to presentation. But I still would have been data driven. It's not about being data driven. It's about being driven by the right data. And if we keep ending up in the same places with the same kids, the same families, year after year after year, we must be looking at the wrong data. And so part of the starting point is exactly your point. So let's get some other data. Right? And let's let some of that community data and some of that teacher data and some of that student data start talking, right, to this state data that's pushing and driving so much of what we're doing. Right? And let's have a more complex and, as you said, democratic conversation, right, about what data matters most and when. Right? And so if like technology is really important to you, right, cast your vote. If technology is really important to your families, right, they'll cast that vote. And that will give even more weight to the conversations that y'all want to have. We don't have air conditioning in there, okay? But, right, maybe you could make the argument about technology and air conditioning. I don't know. Okay, maybe one more. Wait, let me see. Is there anybody else who hasn't asked one before we go back? Okay, go for it.
Okay, my question is...
Sorry, can you tell me your name again?
Yeah, Catherine Ross. My question is, what is our commitment as a district to CAN? Are we committed to a year? Are we committed to 3 years? And how much is it costing?
That's a question I don't have an answer for off the top of my head. Do you know, Glenda, how many years? 1 year. Yes.
You're committed to this?
Yes. Yep.
And what was the cost? Do you know?
I'm not entirely sure, but your principal or your superintendent can definitely tell you, or your board, because they have had to approve it. Yep.
Cluster decision, this is not a district, this is a cluster that's decided based on the survey. I'm a part of the leadership team, my name's Jane, I'm a said, and part of the survey that were the desired need of this cluster talked about social emotional learning and the new language adoption. And so those were the 2 areas that the leadership team from each one of your sites decided on. So I'm sorry that the person didn't feel like they had a voice. You need to talk to your leadership team because they were the ones making these decisions based on the data that you gave the whole team. There was a survey we took at the end of last year, I think it was, talking about your needs, and that's how it was determined.
So I should have had, if I may, since you tried to speak, I would think then, if that's the case, that I'd be presented 2 or 3 different options, we discuss what they bring to the table, and then we would have a vote.
I don't think that they put 3 options. I think they looked at the needs, and they didn't say, how are we going to do the benchmark?
All I can say is we really, the people I've spoken to, we didn't really feel like we had a say in what's going on. It could be great, but we didn't feel like we had a say.
So can I have y'all take this? If I'm here, right? If y'all have any questions for 10, I'm down to take them. If not, I can pass the mic and let y'all I can glove up too if you want to go there. I feel like this is a super important discussion, right? But I want to make sure that if there's specific stuff that while you have me here, because y'all can box when I'm gone. Okay.
I don't decide that, but I'm concerned that there's so much animosity towards it, and we're learning about relationships, responsibility, and relevance to the people that we serve. And I'm thinking, I want as much of that as I can get.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. And look, I've been a teacher a long time, right? And I know this energy, right? And I'm cool. I do not take this personally at all, right? I know the work that we do, right? And I know the work that we do in service to teachers. So I welcome like the concerns, because if the process can improve, right, then we brought something else, right, that I wasn't even anticipating us to be able to bring, right? So I'm cool. I saw maybe one more hand. Come on now. We're teachers. Yeah, right? Sometimes, right? Sometimes, and there's learning that's going on right now for your administration. You know, like there's a reason that your superintendent's in this space right now, because there's growth for everybody, right? And so one of the reasons why I'm trying to create this space for this dialogue is because part of the dialogue, we have dialogue with teachers, we have dialogue with teacher leaders, and we have dialogue with administration, right? And to the degree that the collective dialogue is reaching all of us, then a lot of different parts of what's happening here can grow and improve. Okay? So yes, right, there's always concern. Like, I mean, I would have concerns if I'm sitting in your seat and I'm from Santa Maria and some dude from East Oakland is up here talking to us about how we're going to like develop our PD. Like, of course I'm going to have concerns, right? And so this is part of the process. And to me, it's earned to serve. Like, we have to earn your respect. We have to earn, right, your trust in us as educators. And I think that my experience is that the folks that as you said, like, I mean, it's just not very many teachers are going to vote against relationships, relevance, and responsibility. Like okay, cool. Like I'm down with that, right? But there's a lot of people who rap 3 R's and have a cool, you know, whatever slide deck. At the end of the day, okay, if the work that we're doing with you is not helping you get better as a teacher, is not lifting up the voices of the children and the families that you serve, then I don't want to be here. Because I'm not supporting you. I'm not supporting you, right? The mission, right? I'm a teacher. And if I'm ineffective, I want to get better. Period, point blank. Right? And that goes with whether I'm teaching teachers, right? I'm teaching young people, I'm teaching my sons. Right? And I know that I always have room to grow. So anytime I feel that kind of tension, like, I'm learning. Right? And I got hella respect for y'all for keeping it real. Right? Because that's the only way that we're really going to get better, right, in this, both in this community and in this gig. And I think what you'll experience, right, if this ends up being meaningful for y'all, is that you'll start getting connected with folks in New York, right, who in New York, they come at you sideways. And now we're like homies, right? They come to Oakland, we go to New York. Right? I think it's just because they want to come to Oakland, but so, you know, I'm hopeful, right, that we will earn the right to continue to work with you. And part of that means that I'm hopeful that y'all will continue to be honest with what you need, and we try to figure out, can we provide that or not. I said last one like 4 questions ago.
The message might have been different because
Yep.
of us are feeling like we need to always improve our practice, but can we get started with that so that we can begin to have professional development and spend our time in a way that is very productive because our time is so full?
Indeed. Thank you for both your comments. On your first comment, please email her. Please, thank you. So some schools have already started the priority survey. So it's a site-by-site launch process, right? Different sites will roll it out differently based on who your community is, who your teachers are. So when your site is ready to launch, you can launch. And as I said, there are some sites already in the cluster that have started the priority survey. Okay, I won't say one more. I just want to acknowledge again that you put in a full day in service of our children and our families. And I'm super humbled to be able to spend a little bit of time with y'all. I'll be back on a plane early tomorrow because it's hard to get flights out here. I think next week I might try to drive next time. And then, I'll be back in the classroom tomorrow morning. So when you're doing your thing, I'll be thinking about you, and I hope you'll be thinking about us in East Oakland too. Because as y'all get free, we get free. As we get free, y'all get free. And we all won't be free.
Before we take off, a couple of things. We will get Allison's email out to you if you do wish to email her. Number one. Number two, we'll work with Jeff as a cluster, the admin, and come up with a survey, both for last time and for this time. It'll be a Google survey at this point, where it will be anonymous, but you can have a place to put your name if you do want a specific response, so we can get that out to you. And again, I want to thank Jeff for being here. Thank you so much for being here.